My name is Hillary Marshall, and I am doing my presentation on Jean Houston. First, I'd like to talk about my experience with developing this presentation. Megan said in class last week that faith is a capacity that we can develop. And that really hit home because I didn't know what I was going to do my presentation on. I knew I was going to do it on Jean, but I had no idea what I was going to say. And I tried on having faith that something was just going to come. And at Meridian, I have had the experience a lot of something coming out of nothing. Like I had no idea what I was going to do. I had no idea. And then all of a sudden, something presented itself. Whether it was an idea for a paper, whether it was something from my clinical case study, whether it was reading a question on a post and not understanding it, and reading it again and not understanding it, and then reading it again, and all of a sudden it made sense. And I have this subjectivity that says, you can't imagine it, so therefore it's not possible. And over and over again, dealing with imagination, and dealing with how scared I am to have faith, and how I feel like I need to stress about things in order for things to work out. It really struck a chord when Megan said that faith is a capacity that we can develop. So part of stepping into that faith is, after having prepared what I was going to say for my presentation, to record myself and just do it and trust that it's going to work out. Which is not even my edge, that's past my edge. But that's what I'm doing. So Jean Houston. First of all, I fluctuate between calling her Jean and calling her Dr. Houston. I am very aware that in this patriarchal culture in which we are steeped, we tend to call women doctors by their first name and men doctors by their last name. However, calling her Dr. Houston feels like she's very far away and up there on high and very distant. And I would like to feel closer to her, even though I have never met her. And so I want to acknowledge that patriarchal tendency, but I also want to call her Jean. So first I'm going to tell you my experience of Jean. I've never met her, but I have heard her speak a couple of times. And then I will tell you some facts about her. First, I will tell you that she is a theorist associated with spiritual psychology, which is the psychological orientation I have selected to research this quarter. So, I first saw Jean Houston speak at the Evolution of Psychotherapy conference, which, if you have not gone to, I highly, highly, highly suggest it. The first time I went, it was literally all of the greats that were not dead were at this conference. And I'm not exaggerating. Beck, Yalom, Mnuchin, a bunch of other people. It was amazing. So when I heard Jean speak at this conference, she was able to weave together a lot of different arenas that I'm already interested in. She talked about creativity and possibility and myth and culture and psychology and the arts and magic and mysticism and spirituality. And she was able to draw connections between these different things and various aspects of being alive, from the unity of the human race to the rich depth of variation between cultures, And she weaved it into this tapestry in a way that felt very exhilarating and full of possibility. Normally when people bring together all these different components of life and remind me of how huge the world is and how much the world needs help, I get overwhelmed. But she somehow spoke in this way that transcended the heaviness. She was inspiring and she was energizing. She talked about creativity and she talked about social artistry. I still don't know how to get my head around social artistry, but it felt like she turned this heavy blanket into a ballet. When I heard her speak in one of my Meridian classes, she talked about her relationship to the future. And this idea offered me a sense of hope, connection, and a possible way out of my current existential angst. Well, my constant existential angst also. So here's some facts about her. She is a researcher in human capacities. She is a scholar, philosopher, educator, visionary. She authored 36 books, some of which have been assigned in our Meridian classes. It's no coincidence that she's also the chancellor of Meridian. She's lectured in philosophy, psychology, human development, religion, cross-cultural studies at various national and international colleges. She's been an advisor to the United Nations. She developed something called social artistry, like I said. So, which is about human transformation and social change. So her website describes social artistry as the art of enhancing human capacities in the light of social complexity. It seeks to bring new ways of thinking, being, and doing to social challenges of the world. Sounds like Meridian. So in true Meridian form, I did not know what to do with that definition, and so I looked it up on Wikipedia. On Wikipedia, it says, social artistry is an attempt to address or recognize a particular social issue using art and creativity. Social artists are people who use creative skills to work with people or organizations in their community to effect change. So a little bit about her life. She was born in 1937. She was born and grew up in New York City. Her father traveled a lot. He wrote comedy and wrote comedy for a lot of the great comedians of the time. And she went to 29 schools before she was 12. She earned a PhD in psychology and a PhD in religion. She, along with her husband, Robert Masters, participated in U.S. government-sanctioned research on the effects of LSD. She was instrumental in developing forgot what it was called because I'm nervous. I'll come back to it. Something about human development, human capacities, human potential movement. I'll come back to it when I remember it. When the government stopped condoning the research on LSD, she continued to do research on different states of consciousness. She shifted her focus to achieving altered states through other ways. Guided imagery, bodily movement. She got interested in myth and the imagination and doing exercises to help us talk to different archetypes and different people in the past that we want to relate to or embody or get inspired by. She was close with Margaret Mead. Margaret Mead lived with her the last 6 years of Margaret Mead's life, off and on. Jean was her adopted daughter. She met a lot of really amazing people. She met Einstein. She did some work with Eleanor Roosevelt. She was friends with Aldous Huxley, Buckminster Fuller. She worked with Hillary Clinton when Hillary Clinton was writing a book on It Takes a Village. So here are the key components that I think influenced her life by reading about her and listening to her talk and listening to her stories. She had a spiritual experience at age 6. She went to Catholic school, asked a nun some questions, was told she was going to hell for asking those questions, went home and cried, and had a spiritual experience in which she saw what she called all of reality and felt unity and bliss. And she kept that experience with her. When it would fade, over time, she would encounter some amazing person, and she would get that glimpse again. And she met so many and was friends with so many amazing people. She had a spiritual experience. It started to fade, and then she met Einstein. So this is what she said about her encounter with Einstein. She was 8. Her class went to talk to him. He talked to her class. The class got to ask questions. So this teetering man walks in, and the little kids say, "Mr. Einstein, Mr. Einstein, how can we get as smart as you?" And he said, "Read fairy tales." Then another little kid said, "Mr. Einstein, Mr. Einstein, how do we get smarter than you?" And he said, "Read more fairy tales." So after class, Jean went up to him and said, "Mr. Einstein, Mr. Einstein, I think I know what you're trying to say. You're talking about the imagination." And he said, "Yes, exactly, you got it. It's about the imagination. Math, I'm not good at math. But with imagination, I see this beam of light, I'm carried on this beam of light. I connect with something higher." And he is the person that said that imagination was far more, I forget the quote that Einstein said, but it's a famous quote. When she was 8 years old, she saw Edgar Bergman have a conversation with Charlie McCarthy, who was the dummy. She met him because her father wrote comedy for Edgar Bergen. So she and her father walked in, and they were in the room with Edgar Bergen, and he was having a conversation with his dummy Charlie, and they didn't know he was in the room with him. And Edgar would ask Charlie these really profound questions. "Charlie, what's the meaning of life? Charlie, what are we doing at all here? What are we doing here?" And Charlie would answer. And Edgar would ask another question, very deep and very profound, and Charlie would answer. And finally, Jean and Jean's dad let it be known that they were in the room, and Edgar stopped the conversation he was having with Charlie and said, "Oh, I didn't know you were there." And Jean's father, who wrote for Edgar, said, "That's not something that I wrote for you. What was that?" And Edgar said, "Oh, I was just having a conversation with Charlie, trying to, chat, get information, just asking him questions." And Jean's dad said, "Well, Charlie's you, right? He's just a dummy that questions and the answers are coming from you. And Edgar said, well, technically you're right, but when I ask Charlie these questions, I really have no idea what he's going to say. And that was transformational for Jean. Edgar was able to access this other part of him. And in a lot of Jean's work, she has people access other parts of themselves or other parts of the universe. When she worked with Hillary Clinton, she had Hillary Clinton have a conversation with Eleanor Roosevelt. Another transformational, important part of Jean's life was her work with Joseph Campbell. They were friends, they presented together, and they fought about whether or not there was a heroine's journey. Campbell is known for talking about the hero's journey. He was convinced that there was not a heroine's journey. Houston maintained that there absolutely was a heroine's journey. The hero's journey is usually a solo undertaking, or a male character sets out to fight forces, breaks through the barriers, and slay dragons. Houston said the heroine's journey has a distinctive element. She uses the Wizard of Oz as an example. The hero and the heroine both have journeys that begin with a call, a yearning that cannot be denied, that needs to be responded to. The heroine's journey emphasizes the process of becoming, to discover a higher usefulness, to find new capacities and new ways of being. So when we look at the Wizard of Oz, Dorothy dreams. She dreams big. She has this yearning. The yearning is so big that the universe has to open up and meet her. She's in Kansas. Something needs to change. Something doesn't fit anymore. There's a tornado, a violent change. She is taken to this whole other realm, the realm of creative unconsciousness, where she's able to have her deeper journey in the realm of all possibility. She meets the archetype of her higher self, or of guidance, which is Glenda, the Good Witch. She sets off on her journey, and she meets the disempowered ones. These can also be seen as the disempowered parts of herself. She meets them and she says, come with me, let's go on this journey together. Let's help each other and let's learn from each other. She brings others alongside of her and she becomes a family, a community. She creates a community of the unlikely and the unseen, who then become extraordinary beings because she has seen them. The Scarecrow thinks he doesn't have a brain, and he turns out to be the smartest of all. The Lion is afraid of everything, and he turns out to be the most courageous one. The Tin Man believes he doesn't have a heart, and he turns out to be extremely empathetic. Then they go on the great journey. They arrive at the Emerald City, a place of our own learning for the possible society that we want. And then she meets the wizard, and she finds out that the wizard is just a man. The wizard is just like us. The wizard is us. Jean also talks about this new narrative, which is happening now, and which we are creating now. well, I wrote that she said, this makes all the difference in the new narrative. So the heroine's journey makes all the difference, and all those qualities that I said makes all the difference. So here is a snapshot of how I relate to the heroine's journey in my life. When I was little, maybe 2, maybe 4, maybe 5, I had a nightmare that I couldn't speak. I woke up and I realized my thumb was in my mouth. And I thought, oh, that's why I couldn't speak in my dream. But in my dream, I kept opening my mouth and trying to get something out and trying to get something out and trying to get something out, and I couldn't. And I'm 52 and I still remember that nightmare. Little did I know that that nightmare was manifesting that I couldn't speak. I didn't have a voice. And that's been a theme of my healing journey for most of my adult life, to find my voice. As a teenager, I developed an eating disorder, which was a very effective way of suppressing my thoughts, my feelings, my voice, and creativity. Through my eating disorder, I went through a tremendous amount of pain, akin to Dorothy's tornado. Then I got abstinent. For me, my eating disorder is an addiction. So I was in my addiction, and then I got into recovery. Then I identified with other groups of people who also didn't have a voice. I started working with groups that were voiceless. Before I went to grad school, I was a job coach for clients with developmental disabilities, and I was with the same 3 clients 5 days a week, every day for 6 hours. I got to know them, I got to love them, and I got to help them find their voice. And that's a book. I mean, it's not a book, but it could be a book. It was very powerful to me. My job was to empower them 6 hours a day, 5 days a week. My job was to empower them, to help them do what they wanted to do and say what they wanted to say. And I found my voice through helping them. And I got to feel grateful for what I had, and I got to feel empowered for helping them. Then I decided to go to school for social work, which is all about channeling injustices, advocating for others, and teaching others how to advocate for themselves. For social workers, it's in our code of ethics. It's an ethical obligation to challenge injustice and to help others advocate for themselves. So that's a snapshot of how I relate to the heroine's journey. So now I'm going to ask you a series of questions. So now you get to think about your own story, your own heroine's journey, and what that looks like up to now. I'm going to ask you a series of questions, and I'm going to invite you to imagine or visualize or dream your own story. You can think of the questions I'm going to ask you in 2 different ways. You can apply these questions to experiences of your past, or you can apply them to a journey you're going through right now. There's no right or wrong no right or wrong way to do this. And whether we're thinking about something that happened to us in our past or what's happening to us currently, it's still all one big story. What is your deep yearning? Think about the first thing that comes to your mind. Is this yearning related to a specific hurt that needs to be acknowledged? What does your land of all possibility look like? What does it feel like? What does it smell like? What does it sound like? Does it have a taste? What does it taste like? Who is with you in this other realm? Is your higher self or I friend with you? Are there parts of you that you've had to hide until now to stay safe? Are there parts of you peeking out behind corners, hesitantly daring to make themselves seen just a bit? Maybe shameful or unloved parts that have something to say about their own yearnings? Are you able to grab the hand of your higher self or I friend and look at these parts, accepting their right to exist? What do these parts have to say? What does your higher self or I friend respond to them? What happens next? You can pause the recording and take all the time you need to be with your higher self, your I friend, the different parts of yourself that are showing up in this other realm. When you're done, journal about what comes up for you. Know that you can always go back to this realm of all possibilities when you are called to do so. Jean says that the heroine's journey makes all the difference in the new narrative which is happening now. She invites us all to create our own story, our own myth. Thanks.